Hi everyone, this is Nikki and welcome back to the Fundamentals of Print Design. In this lesson we're going to talk about guide placement and using grids in InDesign to help you lay out your document almost to perfection. Now when it comes to guides, this is something that I use all the time in my projects, and you're going to use these in a way that works for you. Guides and grids are available to help you lay out your images and text that help place them a little bit more accurately than just dropping them into your document and dragging them around. So this is an example document that I have right here just to highlight what the power of grids and guides can do for you. And you can see that we have our images here that are laid out in a nice grid format. And guides are perfect for this because you can lay these down and really help you duplicate your images or any other document that you might be creating in a grid type format. So when it comes to grids in InDesign, you need to have your ruler activated. And if you don't see your ruler, for example, if it looks like this, just hit Control R or Command R on a Mac to bring up the ruler. I actually leave my ruler up all the time in my print projects because it really comes in handy. And then if you go to View Grids and Guides, you want to make sure Lock Column Guides and Snap to Guides is checked. This will make placing those images much easier because the image will actually snap to your guide and make that a lot more accurate placement than if you didn't have that checked. So now we're ready to place our guides. So I am going to go into our document. One quick tip here. This is the preview of what your print will look like. So if you hit W on your keyboard, you can switch between your active document and what it's going to look like when printed. When you're working with a lot of guides, this makes your visual a lot easier and you can quickly see what it looks like and how things are going when you're designing your document. So let's go ahead and move these photos off the page for a second and we'll look at our guides. All right, you can see that I have several guides placed, but we're going to go from a blank slate here. Now the columns were placed in the previous lesson, and I usually have about 6 columns depending on the size of my document, just for a little extra placement. But right now I am actually going to remove these columns so that just kind of clears that out. It'll be easier to see our guides. So now you have a blank document and you're looking at placing images in a grid type format. Where do you begin? Well, what I usually do is I use this margin as my first guide before we even place a real guide. And I would drag my images like that. All right, so the first thing that you run into is that you have some overlap here. So I am going to take this image and just hold down Shift and use my right arrow to push this out. Click this image, hold down Shift, hit my left arrow to push that out. And that gives us some equal space for our image. Okay, so now I've placed 2 images. Now we need to move on to place 2 images below those images. Now you could just come in here and do this and kind of eyeball it and hope for the best, but it can be difficult to do that and it's not as quick. So the next step that you want to do is you want to place some guides. So to do that, I'm going to take and place a guide on the outside of this photo. And if you're not good at just dragging and dropping, and what I did was just click and drag from that ruler, and we'll do the same thing over here, you can get very specific up in this box down to inches, and you can hand type that into that box. So you can either click and drag it out from the ruler, or you can get very specific and place your guide using math on your X and Y coordinates here. And then I'm going to take another guide, and basically I'm just dropping a guide at the border of my images. Okay, so now we have that placed, but now we need to add one more below here to mimic the space that we have here. All right, so now we have a guide in place, so now we can drop in our next 2 images and line those perfectly up with the new guides that we placed. and then you have equal spacing on all sides. Now, one thing that I'll show you, as you can see, these are all sized to fit, but if you were to just place an image and it may be larger to begin with, say it's like that, this makes it really easy to go in there and size this image down. So I'm going to drag a guide to the base of this photo next. So I have guides on all four sides. So if I were to hold down Command Shift on a Mac, hit this bottom corner here, I'm clicking and dragging and holding down Shift and Alt all at the same time. I can drag this up to that guide and have a image that is sized correctly for the space. Now you might notice that we have a little overlap right there. And because there's nothing important in this image, I'm going to clean that up and just go straight up to the guide. And I didn't cut anything off of my guide, off of my image, sorry, to do that. Same thing here. See how I have a little overlap? I can click and drag that up to match. And zooming in really helps with this because you can see I'm a little off on my images. But zooming in, I can quickly correct that so they all fit perfectly into my guide. So if I zoom back out here, we can do this yet again for our last set of images. And then we just drop them in. Then if you hit W, you can see now you've got your images back into a grid format. So guides are extremely helpful in placing items and getting them into that grid format, but you don't always have to use guides just for grids. You can use them in magazine design and lay out your masthead up top and where your footer is going to go at the bottom. For example, I can click and drag that down there, and nothing, that means that everything needs to be up here, but I might want some footer text to fit in there, or I might want to get super creative and throw a colored box down there. I'm just going to do this very quickly. And I want it to extend all the way to the bleed and be cut off. See? So there's so many opportunities when it comes to guides, and guides really help you play around with a visual. Now, one other element in your guides and grids is another grid, your document grid, that you can show, and that just gives you a lot more lines to work with. And again, you can make sure that your items snap to that document grid if you want to, and you can, of course, turn that on and off as well. So that is a look at how to use guides to help you place your images and your text. The next lesson, we're going to talk about the InDesign workspace and how I customize it for all of my print projects. So stay tuned, and thanks for watching.